So anyway, okay, Vin Scully, 94 years old, dying as he had called Dodgers baseball 67 years.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about him forever. He was obviously the announcing voice and for love of the game, as we've made jokes and references over the course of the last decade or so. You know, it's one of our shticks. But what struck me, and I mean, I guess in some ways it's kind of like with Bill Russell. Everybody has a story. Everybody talks about the time he went out of his way and how as good of an announcer was, better man, better ambassador for the game, for Los Angeles, for, I mean, hell, Brooklyn back in the day, everything involved with him. But what got me is just the number of stories and experiences and memories that go when somebody like that dies, that you hope there are tapes and recordings and books and everything to chronicle his life and his experiences and things he's seen. You're talking about a guy who covered basically all of Jackie Robinson's career for the most part. Somebody who's done all-star games and World Series. He did Dwight Clark's the catch in the 49ers playoff game. I mean, you're talking about Kirk Gibson's 17th home run.
Yeah.
I mean, all these different things to where it was his voice and his cadence and his understanding of broadcasting, but it was better than anyone ever. It's what I talked to Ben Ingram about just a few weeks ago on the other podcast, was letting a game breathe and how do you incorporate stories and how you do that thing in baseball that you can do in no other sport because of the dead air and the time that's available for that and what he was able to bring to the sport. And they're just, I mean, they're historians. They're wealths of knowledge in such different ways that was the, I mean, maybe that's the saddest because a human being lost their life, but that was the stark thing is just when those people pass away, the things that are lost with them, and it's a loss to the game and frankly the fabric of our culture in a way.
It hit me last night. I'd gotten back from Tupelo. Carson had soccer practice, and we got back, and I was trying to decide, trivial stuff like, is it too late to eat dinner? I had not eaten. I was hungry, all that stuff, and I was on Twitter just for a second, and someone referenced Vin Scully in the past tense, and I kind of panicked. Isn't that funny? 94-year-old man, and I kind of panicked. And I'm like, what's this? Surely that's just Twitter's not home.
Just an error, yeah.
Twitter's not the greatest place for grammar. A lot of mistakes at twitter.com. And I start looking, and then I finally did the search. And there it was, and man, I started crying. I don't know why it hit me like that, but it did. Like, I know we do like you said, the shtick on For Love of the Game, but I genuinely love the movie.
Yeah, no.
But what I love about the movie is him. He ties it together. And as a young person, you didn't get to, like, I grew up at a time when you didn't get to hear a lot of baseball games. I grew up in a place where we didn't get there was no AM radio in Ruston, Louisiana, where you could hear a team. Sometimes late at night you could get WWL out of New Orleans.
Sure, yeah.
Really late at night you might be able to get WGN 720. Maybe. So I heard like the NBC game of the week and Monday Night Baseball. So like Howard Cosell and Vin Scully and people like that, those Keith Jackson, those were the voices of, if you were a sports fan, and I was, those were the voices that you grew up with. And then when I got to those years, man, when I was covering Auburn, and I would make that godforsaken drive from Mobile to Auburn over and over and over, I had satellite radio where I could listen to games. And you'd listen to like Bob Uecker call a Brewers game, Vin Scully call a Dodgers game. And you didn't care who won the Dodgers-Mets game.
Mm-mm.
But you'd listen for 3 hours and 20 minutes because it was Vin Scully, and you always knew the count.
Oh.
Always. Like one of the things, like some guys are good at telling stories on the radio. but you'll be like, hey, dude, what just happened? Like, you'll hear the bat hit the ball and still not know what happened. Vin Scully was that guy who could tell this story about something that happened 20 some odd years ago. It was interesting. You were completely enthralled in the story, and yet you knew
it was
that
1-2 to.
You knew that Pedro Guerrero just fouled off the 1-2 pitch off to the left side, and a man in a yellow shirt had caught it.
Because it was the perfect cadence of there and back, and back.
It would come back, and then you knew Guerrero had struck out, and that the next hitter was coming to the plate, and that he was hitting 217, but that he was on a hot streak in the last 3 weeks. He was hitting 352 in the month of June, and then back into the story.
Yeah, Corey Seager 2 for 3, single and home run today, and Mickey Mantle in 1956, and
that was a gift. And you didn't even though he called the Dodgers, and you knew he was the voice of the Dodgers, and you knew that he was probably cheering for the Dodgers, you could listen to a Dodgers-Cubs broadcast as a Cubs fan and not even get slightly irritated.
And some of that is he was perfect, and it's what enough people don't learn in broadcasting. Again, you're listening to my broadcasting experience, so I know nothing about calling a game. But, and I talked to Ben about this too, you watch a lot of his famous calls, and there's maybe a little bit of a slight cadence change or an up-tempo, but he never screams. He never does I'm going to lose my mind right here. There's an evenness to it.
Yeah.
And he was perfect at providing the ambient noise, the sounds, to let the moment play out and marinate as it needed to. Because I got down a kind of a YouTube hole after I had seen that he had passed away. And his last call at Dodger Stadium was a Charlie Culberson walk-off home run to clinch the NL West in 2016. I guess maybe regular season or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But, so what he's doing, and it is textbook broadcasting, even in his final inning, is the Dodgers, I guess, have a half game or 1 game lead in the NL West. So he's following his game in the 10th, and the Dodgers are the home team. They're trying to walk off whoever they were playing. I don't remember. And then he's following the Padres and the Giants at the same time, and they're in the 9th. So he's literally calling his game while watching TV, and he's going, and Brandon Belt up now 2-1, and he's doing the Giants thing at the same time, and he's mixed them in together. And then Culberson hits the home run, and his voice tempo never changes. It's Charlie Culberson down the left field line. It's out of here, and your LA Dodgers are the NL West champions. They've done it on their own merit, blah, 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 blah. And then he goes silent for like 20 seconds, lets it all kind of play out, and then comes back, gives one look. Now we no longer care about the Padres and the Giants. Going to leave you there, and then he kind of gives like the setup on what's next, and that's the call, and that's it. There's not this Chip Carey. Oh my God, line drive to left.
Yeah, none of that. Belted. Or Kemosabe or whatever the guy did at the College World Series in the Super Regionals.
The Texas Tech guy.
Yeah, where you're like, wait, slow down, hold up.
Yeah.
I mean, I kept waiting for him to go, he cured cancer.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just so emotional. It was like, calm down. But I think with Scully, it was also because of the way he did his job. Like I've read a lot about the way that he prepared for broadcast. He would go, and in part because everyone in every organization had such respect for him, but he would sit, like, let's just say it's a Cubs-Dodgers game, right? He would sit down with Dave Roberts before the game, obviously, but he also sat down with Joe Madden, knew the people, knew the storylines.
And they gave him that time.
They gave him that time. He knew what was going on, and people trusted him. But he never made himself bigger than the game, because I think he knew, he knew what greatness looked like, right? I mean, he knew how big of a moment it was for Kirk Gibson that day to essentially no business playing, couldn't play, to hit the home run right there. And he made it was about Kirk Gibson. It was about the Dodgers. It was about what a cool moment it was. It wasn't about Vin Scully. And by doing that as consistently as he did it, he made it such an enjoyable listen. You felt if you were just driving down the road listening to a Dodgers game, he was able, and not many people can do this. It's one of the things at the end of every Cubs season, whether the Cubs are good or bad, and most of the time they're bad, I get a little choked up. I always listen to the last game, always.
Okay.
Because I love Pat Hughes and Ron Coomer. Because Pat Hughes and Ron Coomer are one of the rare broadcast booths that can make you feel driving down the road like you're in the booth with them. And you guys are just watching the game. And Scully could do that without a partner. He could make it feel like you were sitting there with him at Dodger Stadium just watching the game. And he was telling you stories. And it was like, as he got older, it was like going to the game with your grandfather. And it was really cool. And it was enjoyable. You'd look up and you're like, they're in the 7th inning and I couldn't care less and I'm listening. I don't want the game to end. And there aren't many broadcast crews that can do that. Like, I'll give you an example, not picking on them, but I was listening last night driving back to Yankees Mariners. I like listening to baseball.
Yeah.
And that broadcast is difficult to listen to. And it's legendary voices, and I don't really get into it much.
No, there's very few where you will just turn it on and go, I'm going to listen to that guy. I'm just listening to him. I don't like whatever. Yeah, you're spending 3 hours. You know, everybody has their dudes because baseball on the radio is a completely different animal than anything else in the world because the number of games, the ability to kind of grow up with these guys. I mean, they're your thing.
Yeah, and if you listen to a basketball game, for example, there's not a lot of opportunity to tell stories.
No,
because it's up and down, up and down, up and down. You know, and a football game has a kind of a cadence and a rhythm to it. But a baseball game, a baseball broadcast, one game could be completely different than the other. You know, you might have Greg Maddux throwing a 3-hit shutout in a game that goes 2 hours and 15 minutes, or you might have a game where Steve Traxel starts and it's 47 seconds between every pitch, and the game's 4 hours and it just drags. And if you're not a good broadcaster, that's a tough broadcast. But Vin Scully would take that and use a game like that as just kind of a canvas to paint his story. And yet you'd never really think that he was making it about him.
And it has to be so natural and just who you are, because if you even for a tinker try to fake that or be that kind of person, it comes off so flat and so terrible that it doesn't even start to work.
Yeah.
You can't just become become that guy. You are that guy or you are not that has the ability to do that, because frankly, you got to earn people's trust to even tell the stories as an announcer. I mean, somebody brand new comes up and, hey, let me tell you. Man, okay, fine, whatever, shut up. Like,
well, you go listen to, you posted it, I think, on the board. You listen to the way that he broadcasts for love of the game. All right? It makes you think that he's really there on a Saturday afternoon at Yankee Stadium watching this veteran pitcher,
the twilight of his career,
throw up the way that he does it was just so, it felt like you were really watching a game. You think Billy Chappell is trying to throw a perfect game with all of this stuff going on, and it's a sappy love story where the boy gets the girl at the end, but just barely. After he breaks his heart, he breaks her heart, and they end up together when you think it's just not going to happen. It's just not in the cards. And they weave in all these other things, but what makes that movie good is Scully.
It's in its own way, it's a time capsule because you've got Scully and Augie Garrido both just hanging out.
Yeah,
there in that movie.
Like, they didn't need Steve Lyons in that movie.
Oh no, they could have just stuck with him.
And he was fine.
He's Steve Lyons,
but you could throw him out. You could change nothing, but just let Scully tell stories. And I think Vin Scully could have started telling Billy Chappell stories, and we would have been like, "Oh wow, Vin knew Billy." And you would just listen.
But in a way, it's an Easter egg because they don't really point out that, hey, there's this famous broadcaster doing the movie or the whatever. You have to kind of know that. But then when you know it, you go, oh, that's
so for
cool.
the person who's not a baseball
that's
fan,
what I'm saying.
who watches the movie, they don't even notice.
Yeah, the
because he's
rom-com
so
watcher that comes in and goes, I'm
Yeah.
just watching Kevin Costner and Kelly Preston and
try to
doing the
figure
deal.
this out. And gosh, I hope they end up
Yeah,
together.
they're not hearing the announcer going, oh my God, that's Vin Scully.
Yeah, I mean, I kept waiting. You know, you go back and you look at it, you're like, they kind of missed an opportunity for Vin to get rid of Steve and let Vin tell some of the stories. You know, I was down in Lakeland a few years ago after Billy had the sawing accident with his right hand. He couldn't feel the ball. And, you know, I mean,
sure,
going back, that's probably how they should have done it. I don't know. Just for whatever reason, though, and I guess it's the ultimate testament to a person. I've never met Vin Scully. I don't know that I've ever been in the same place with Vin Scully.
Sure.
I would have loved to have met Vin Scully. Never met him. And his passing at the age of 94. 94 is a pretty full life.
Yeah.
Choked up a complete stranger. I mean, I literally started crying. I feel choked up right now about that. That's a loss. There's a void there.
No, in so many different ways. That's what I'm saying. I mean, I hope there are archives upon archives. I hope that somebody has those documents, those stories, all those things. I would assume.
Well,
he's been retired for 6 years now.
You would hope that somebody has sat down with him and said, "Hey, Vin, let's just tell stories.
Let's do it all. Here,
Let's tell
I'll
stories.
leave the tape on as long as we can leave the tape on." Because I mean, it's and there's that person for everything, but that was baseball's person. I mean, you know, look, I mean, again, there's not even a comparison, and he would laugh and admit that too. But you know, I mean, even from a archive standpoint, you know, like David Kellum keeps all of his scorebooks from 1977 on. He's been doing Ole Miss baseball for 40 whatever years, and the project I'm working on, I needed something, and I said, "Hey, you have this," and within 10 minutes, here's the picture, here's this, here's this, here's this. Like he'd sent me the score, his scorebook, and the official lineup cards for all the College World Series games. Like it's, you know, I was writing a story on Ole Miss's last win in Baton Rouge prior to 19 for a series in 82. And I said, hey, who was on that team? And then in 10 minutes, here's literally play-by-play and the entire thing. Well, radio announcers are really who has those things. They're the only humans that have those type of things. So when they go, if you don't find a way to compile, there is so much lost about any program, any team, any franchise, anything that's out there in the world.
To your point, I know we got to get to football in a second. I promise we will. It's going to be a long season. We'll talk a lot of football.
Yeah, I'm actually not even that worried about football today.
Pat Hughes' scorecard from Game 7 of the 2016 World Series, he, like the great baseball people, like you mentioned, DK, he keeps all of the scorecards just because he did the game and he keeps them. And someone asked if they could see a copy of it. And he was like, yeah. And all of a sudden it's selling like hotcakes. People just want it as a thing. Well, it's just a scorecard.
Yeah, sure.
But it was Pat Hughes's, and it shows all of his notes and his thoughts and his things to remind himself to say.
Yeah, I mean,
you know, just to that point, if you're a Cubs fan and you listen to Pat Hughes all the time and you see that, like, I mean, I've listened to Pat Hughes through a bunch of losses, like a bunch of games where this sucks. And yet you feel like you're sort of commiserating with him. At first it was with Ron Santo, and now it's with Ron Coomer. And you kind of mark time that way with guys like that. So, yeah, I mean, for a Dodgers fan, and they've had time because it's been years, but today's a sad day.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Podcast brought to you in part by Prime Shrimp, primeshrimp.com. 5 different flavors to go